I enjoy EDCing a fixed blade pretty often, and here's a cold steel throwback, Mini Pendleton Hunter. It's been a decent knife. I thought the sheath was terrible at the time, so I went with one of these, and it's been nice, but sometimes this is still a touch too big. And I might go down to this guy. This is a Demko Knives. If you've never seen my review of the Armiger 2, you need to go watch this. Super handy little knife. It has the shark's foot, incredibly easy to sharpen up. Can go on a keychain, a backpack, slips into any pocket, but sometimes this is a little too small, especially if I'm going out in the woods. And that's where the big brother comes in. This is the Demko Armiger 4. The Armiger 4 is an excellent woods blade, or maybe even combat fighting knife, utility knife. I've used it as everything that I could think of, and I've enjoyed it. It's a comfortable knife, excellent handle and ergonomics for a lot of tasks. Pretty affordable blade with really good steel, actually. This is EDC VR steel. CRV2, is that what it is? CRV2, I think. That's what the actual name is. Anyways, really good steel. This blade, though, sometimes is illegal, so I actually have to be careful depending on where I'm going. If I am going to stay within the legal limits. I do love, and I mean love, this knife right here. This is a Shark Cub in 20 CV, aluminum handles, and yes, Demko sent these out to my channel for review. This is probably my most premium knife I have right now, and I love it. The action is incredible. The handle scales are very thin, it's comfortable, and it's got a little bit steeper price point. To be honest with you, this might put it out of reach for some people. It's just a touch higher than a lot of people are ready to spend on an EDC, but this is legal in everywhere that I go. It's legal, it's functional, and it's got extraordinarily awesome steel. If I don't carry this, a lot of times it's going to be this one. And so this is a 3V version, okay? This is the 20.5. So it's a little bit bigger blade. It's slightly more robust. I think it's just slightly thicker in the pocket. And this is a knife I can beat up on an EDC when I'm doing hard work. And I don't really carry this as a gentleman's carry. This is more tough work kind of blade, and that 3V does really well because it's been tough for me. But sometimes I don't want to carry this one, or I don't want to ruin that 3V blade. I don't know, maybe I'm kind of a nerd for protecting this knife somewhat. But I won't use this one like a screwdriver, that's for sure. The price point, again, is going to be just slightly higher, a little cheaper than the 20 CV steel, but just slightly higher. And I think they're worth it. My honest opinion, it's worth it. But I know there's always going to be somebody who's going to appreciate a more affordable option because they just don't need the better handle scales. They don't need micarta or G10, and they don't need the 3V steel. I know they exist, and Demko knows that you exist as well, and this is going to be the blade for you, or maybe this one is going to be the blade for you. These are new, brand new Shark Cubs that are just launching right now, should be up on the website. And there's a few variants. I'm going to show you two today. I've already carried them plenty. I've been playing around with them a lot. And this Grivery, this OS10 steel is a winning combination. These are excellent blades. Let's get into it. Taking a look at the profile angles here, you're going to see that even with those Grivery handles, they don't look like Grivery, but they are actually Grivery. They're just textured in a way that they almost feel just like G10. There is a difference, but it's very minimal. You can see the side profile. It's pretty thin, fits in the pocket really well, and it's not overly broad, but it's not so thin that it's hard to get a hold of. The blade profiles, now this is called the Slicer Shark right here, profile. So it's a little bit sort of like a spear point to me. And this one obviously doesn't have handle scales. You definitely can use the cutout to open it, and it's not hard to open. Maybe on camera it is. It's not hard to open. I just prefer using the shark lock mechanism. That is, oh wow. I'm gonna keep that in the video. That was a major fail because I hit the table. It is probably one of the easiest, if I'm not hitting the table, dear goodness. It is probably one of the easiest blade mechanisms to work with. I like this over every single EDC option I've used so far, including automatic knives. I prefer the shark lock. I think this is probably, I don't know, There's something about it that's just way more natural, especially for EDC carry. That was the slicer shark, and then you have just kind of your standard clip point, which is pretty popular nowadays. A lot of people like a clip point, and if you're a thumb studs kind of guy, and even if you're left-handed, thumb studs are available, and it's a nice, thin, slicey profile. This is something that Andrew Demko did that honestly, I just didn't see Cold Steel doing very often. I hate to even mention it, but Cold Steel just didn't very often get down to these thinner profiles for EDC blades. A lot of them were still just very robust, and Andrew Demko has a huge assembly of options with robust knives, very big knives, and now these smaller, very practical knives. And I think they did a good job in materials and also options, because I know not everybody is going to go with the cutout design. They're not going to prefer this. Some people aren't going to prefer thumb studs. I'm going to be honest with you, this blade changed my mind. I actually prefer this. I like this cutout. And again, because I use the shark lock mechanism most of the time, I just don't need that thumb stud. And so this has become a very sleek, easy to carry option, but I don't want to damage that 20 CV blade and use it like an idiot. So with these retailing under $100, I feel actually pretty comfortable using the heck out of these, especially this clip point. It's been very functional. I like the belly on it. I do like the coating, or the stonewash finish rather. And OS 10, I've got a huge amount of experience with OS 10, multiple years, many blades with OS 10. And this sharpens up, it hones, as well as any professional blade steel, anything that is made for knives, this is right there with it. And I think it's a touch better than OS 8, so I'm actually happy to see OS 10 instead. Again, back to the 20.5, I just thought it might be useful for those of you who are trying to compare and decide which one fits best for you. I just want to show a little bit of a comparison. Show you that pocket thickness, they're comparable actually, not terribly different, but the blade stock thickness is slightly thinner, and I do believe that this model is slightly thinner behind the edge than the 20.5 is. So the slicer shark here, show you that grind. It is hard for me to pick which one I like more. I just like these knives a lot. But if pocket space is an issue for you, I'm just going to show you that there's a difference. All right, there is a difference. Let me line up the tang here, or the handle. There is a difference. It's not much, it's only slightly shorter. The 20.5 is only slightly taller, slightly thicker, and slightly longer. But some of you need that reach, or you need more belly, or just cutting performance-wise, you want a little bigger blade. You know, this is still a really good option, and I would take this any day over the competitors at this price point. I love this knife. But when I'm not going to need this, or I want something a little smaller and actually lighter, this slicer shark, I think it's my favorite between the two that I've tried here. I like this clip point a lot, and it's not like I don't like either of them. I just think I like this model a little better. And you can see size-wise, line up those handles one more time. Probably fair to compare the clip point against the clip point. Let's do that instead. Yeah, there you can see a little comparison. It's only slightly smaller in some respects and slightly thinner. But for an EDC, I suppose every amount counts. You can see that blade stock thickness is going to be a pretty stark contrast between the two. And I'm going to say, if you like smaller EDCs, you like slicey EDCs, this new one is going to be for you. The Shark Cub series as a whole is going to be for you. Let me go ahead and lay out the other Cubs here. Let's just get them lined up. So you have your 20.5 followed by Shark Cub with a clip point, the slicer shark, and then the shark's foot with the titanium, or not titanium, rather 20 CV blade with aluminum handles. There's just a little layout for you to see what those are going to look like. This has a slightly thicker profile appearance because this has a swedge, a false edge on top, and it just generally, because it's a clip point, this seems a little thinner behind the edge. than the others do, but I'm going to tell you, in breaking down boxes, cardboard, cutting performance, they're all very, very good. I actually don't think that this one cuts much better than the rest of them, but it is a little bit because it's so much thinner behind the edge. Now, I'm a big guy, and so in-hand performance matters. You can see with the 20.5 where my hand lines up, whether I'm in hammer grip. Let me adjust the camera here a little bit. Whether I'm in kind of a hammer grip like this, so I wear XL size gloves at least, and I'm not having terrible binding. It's easy for me to get a good purchase on this, especially if I put my thumb forward on this one. It is long enough. The lanyard hole is still somewhat exposed, and the finger grooves, which are minimal, don't interfere even when I choke up. I like this a lot. It's a good fit, but that hasn't stopped me from using this blade. And again, these finger grooves, they just kind of work for me. It does get swallowed up in my hand a little more if I'm doing this, but most of the time when I'm using it, it's more like this anyways. So that hasn't been a terrible issue, and I just so appreciate this shark's foot design. It's just putting a lot of power into that point, a lot. And if I don't need stabby performance or big belly, this has been just phenomenal. Let's put that aside. And these are going to be no different, except the feel. I actually think, I hate to say it, I think these might feel a little more comfortable in hand. They seem to be slightly more rounded on the scales. There's a little more contouring. The G10 on the 20.5 here is not quite as contoured. It's a little contoured. It's just not quite as contoured. It's pretty good. It's just trying to compete with Grivory. Grivory is easier to work with, and it costs you less, and it's still very strong. You know, you have these internally lit, so if I can show you, there are some liners here as well. So this is really strong for a small knife. This lock is incredibly strong, but it's got these contours and no sharp edges. So in hand, this is what it looks like for me with XL size hands. Still very practical. If it makes you pucker to put your finger that close to the blade, it doesn't for me, but you can go back here and I can still close the blade without getting bit. This is probably something a lot of people have questions about. See that? It's not biting me. Now, I don't have big fat chunker hands. They're pretty average. I'm not a hefty guy, I guess, but you know, about 250 pounds, so I'm not small either, and it does not bite me on either model or any model. I haven't had any Demkos with an issue with that. I think it's thought through pretty well. Easy enough to close, and if you're doing the shark lock, then your fingers are already out of the way. I pretty much just put my middle finger on the pocket clip and I hold up here, thumb goes to the side. So smooth. Incredible action on these blades, actually. One more thing worth addressing, be the pocket clips. And this is something, you know, I really didn't care that much about a couple years ago. Let me just lay these out for you. A couple years ago, I probably just didn't care a lot about pocket clips, and I've noticed that I do care. There are a couple things about pocket clips that bother me. Not these ones, but just in general, something that can be obnoxious with pocket clips would be pocket clips that extend all the way and are very wide and loud. I don't like loud pocket clips. I don't like high riding pocket clips. I would not consider this a high ride right here, just for reference. But I don't like pocket clips that start up here on the body. I'm not going to name some other brands, but there's a couple other brands that just generally have really high riding pocket clips that are gaudy and big, and they are sometimes too tight, and some of them are so loose that you can still lose the knife with a huge pocket clip. Now the 20.5 is going to have a larger size pocket clip, and this is about as big as I like to go. It's probably perfect for this size knife. I could change my mind on that, but I would say this is probably perfect in my estimation for this size knife. It's not uncomfortable in hand. It doesn't get in the way. It doesn't, when I squeeze the knife, when I'm working with it hard, it's rounded off. It doesn't have sharp edges. This is a good pocket clip, and the retention is excellent, maybe perfect. I shouldn't use that word because people get suspicious when I start saying things are perfect, but for me and my uses, I mean, this is really good for that size knife. Let's move that on. Now moving on to the Cubs. The Cubs pocket clip is going to be smaller. It's in the appropriate place, and when I grab it, I hardly feel it in my particular hand. You know, your mileage may vary, but for me, I just don't feel that pocket clip. It's not binding, And if you can actually see the shape of the pocket clip, it has appropriate bends in the right place, so it slips onto your jeans or like a pair of khakis or slacks, shorts, basketball shorts. It slips onto those really easily, but it has enough texture on this Grivery or on the G10. It has enough texture that it grabs on. The closest I can come to being a little slippery would be these aluminum scales. It doesn't bother me, I'm careful about it, and you can see there's just a slight pocket clip gap on this one. These do not have a pocket clip gap, and they're going to be retained. You're not going to lose your knife, and I know $89 is much more affordable. It's a really great deal for anything from Demko, in my opinion, but 89 bucks is 89 bucks, and I don't want to lose it. So I think the pocket clip is going to stay, or the knife is going to stay because of the pocket clip design, and it's not going to frustrate you. It's not going to bind up in your hand, and it's not going to be in the way, and it's not real gaudy and loud. It's not broad and wide. It's just enough, and it's deep carry. Check that out. That's pretty deep. Let's take a look in the pocket in a second. Real briefly, just for reference, here's a 20.5 in the pocket. This one doesn't bother me at all. It's easy enough to get to. I think it carries deep enough for the size of knife. I like that one quite a bit. It takes up very small, a small amount of space. The channel here for my knife compared to my pocket size is reasonable. I can still have my phone in my pocket for the most part, a pen, maybe something else, carry something for my kids. I can have that in the pocket, and this doesn't agitate me. It doesn't stick out because it's a relatively thin knife. Okay, profile's good. Pocket clip carries deep enough for me, and I can get a good grasp on it and go to work pretty quick. Now let's take a look at the cub. This is the slicer cub. This goes into the pocket really well. This is like a medium weight fabric, pair of shorts. And because of the way that this deploys, it's kind of interesting that when I grab it, my middle finger goes on the pocket clip, it comes out, and I'm already in perfect position to deploy the knife. So if you're working a lot with a blade, you're cutting a lot, and you can't wear a fixed blade, something like this is very smooth and easy to get to, and this is even smaller in the pocket. And again, it's deep pocket carry. It doesn't leave much out there if you're worried about how much people see. Just a little bit there, not too much on the pocket clip, but it seems to sit well, and I just don't believe at all that I'm gonna lose this knife. I feel very comfortable. A lot of that has to do with this Grivery handle, the texture, and the way that the pocket clip sits overall. That profile seems to be good to go. And that's going to be the same on all the cubs. I think they're all going to sit really nicely and be retained well. All right, first I have the slicer. And I know we would all like to pretend that we have these really grandiose uses for knives that are so brutal and difficult, but most of the time, you know what you're doing? That. You're cutting up a box or cutting it down to fit into something. That's got to be the majority of average guys out there, and there's no shame in that. That's still worthy of a good tool, and maybe even more so of something in AUS 10 that's easily touched up. And if I'm going to slice a lot, which I'm going to cut this whole box up kind of a lot, this is easy to touch up, which is the purpose of this demonstration. Now the slicer is just a bit thicker in the profile of the grind, or the grinds, here than the clip point. The clip point is a touch thinner, and the grind line starts a little higher. I've already talked about that in length, in detail. I'm going to use this one first, break down this box, and then maybe cut up some leather, maybe some zip ties, a couple other things. I'll let you know. Well, you can't use the sharpening choil as a blade. Whoops, there we go. It's definitely slipping through. Very slicey. Okay, so going with the grain should never be difficult. Any knife that can't cut while going with the grain is probably not worth its stock. But how about going against the grain and doubling up? Let's do it like this and double up against the grain. That's a little better test of slicing through. And that is really good performance right there. That's against the grain, doubled up. That's awesome, actually. It's a little bit better than I was expecting it to do. Doesn't seem to bind up very much, which is good. That's good. Let's just go some across grain here. So this is doubled up right now, and it actually slips through really nice. You know, it's a thin blade profile, which is appropriate. I like that it's relatively thin, comparatively thin. And there's still enough belly there to pierce and to get through quite a bit. That's impressive that this can slice so well. I thought it would take more effort, but I think the ergonomics of the handle help. I think it's more comfortable than a lot of other blades that have a similar blade length. It just seems to cut and slice a little better. I guess that's why they call it the slicer. Let's do some more. How about leather? I've used this for about 3 weeks now, and in the 3 weeks, the only thing altogether that I've done on this was to strop it. I took a piece of leather like this, and I didn't even do a good job. I went like that a few times on a piece of leather that I had. I've not treated these super well because I don't believe most of you will treat them super well. I just wanted to test it the way the average person is probably going to functionally use it. Let me zoom in. I'll cut some leather here. Okay, first up, I'm going to try to use that point and slice the leather through. Definitely all the way through. Easily cut up that piece. Let's try one more strip here. I'm actually cutting through the cardboard. I'm trying not to ruin this table underneath. Yeah, that's not difficult at all. Put these together, and yeah, let's bend it over here and just do a pressure cut against that bundle. Really simple. Not difficult at all. Didn't have to apply much pressure. Now let's put it all together. It's a lot of leather, actually. It's a good stack right there. Okay. Let's just push against that, just a push cut. And I guess I have to slice a little bit to get through that much, but that was a solid 1/2 inch of leather into scrap there. Not difficult, not uncomfortable. This shark lock right here does not get in the way. Especially when I'm doing this or doing this, it really doesn't get in the way. If I choke up a little bit, I know it's there, but it's not digging in. It is rounded, and the jimping that it has on the spine of that shark lock is very minimal jimping. It's not aggressive, but it is functional. I like that a lot. That was pretty good. All right, I like this knife a lot, and I do want to test it some more. I want to know, here's something reasonable to test it against. I don't think batoning is necessary with folding knives almost ever. I can think of better ways to do things, but I'm still going to do this. Let's find out if this can handle a little bit of light batoning. It does have a lot of knots in it. 1, 2, 3 serious knots. It came from a piece of elm, which can be quite twisty, and it's about a little more than thumb thickness for me, and I wear XL size gloves. Let's just find out if that lock can handle it. Oh, that's a bad knot, actually. I guess I didn't realize it was such a bad knot, but yep. Not getting rock lock out of that. I'm going to guess that if you had to use this in a pinch for something a little bit abusive like that, that it would handle the little bit just like I showed you right there, because like I said, this is elm. It's got some particularly bad knots, and it sheared through each knot. It did not just snap it. I can actually see it had to cut through those knots because it's just a twisty wood in general. Let's try some feather sticks, actually. I don't have an optimum piece of wood for feather sticks. And I don't think it's what Andrew Demko had in mind with this blade, but I'm sure he didn't think that it couldn't be used. So let's just try some really average feather sticks here. I could go find a better piece of wood, I suppose, but that's probably not going to happen when I'm outdoors. I'm probably just going to find something and make it work. And if this is the only thing I have in my pocket, and this is the only wood I could find, other than that knot right there, I can make some acceptable feather sticks out of this. Let's try the side that doesn't have a knot. Let's see what happens. Now I can do stock removal without pain, which you can tell when people have to adjust their hand a lot or readjust a lot on a knife handle or a pistol grip for that matter. It's usually because it's uncomfortable. It's causing problems. This, I don't find myself readjusting a whole bunch when I'm doing hard work with it, cutting up a lot of things. So I can do big curls and I can do, let's do a delicate one. And I can do tiny little curls, things that would catch a fire steel or a flint or my lighter. Yeah, it'll feather stick. I'm not going to keep going with that because there's no reason. It'll feather stick. How about notching? Notching, if this is all you got on you, that thin blade profile slices in really decent. For such a small knife, the short blade and a relatively short handle, it's actually pretty functional and not terribly uncomfortable. Again, I think that has to do with the rounding of these contours right here and the grivery itself. It's an appropriate grip, but I don't personally think it's slippery or hyper aggressive like some G10 can be. Making a notch, absolutely. And still no rock lock. Looks like it's good to go. I know that these kind of EDC style blades are not made for woods work. It's just that wood is an easy medium for me to get, and it's usually a consistent thing from in a sense that each person can get a hold of it and they kind of know how things usually cut and usually work. So if I tell you it's a piece of elm, you can get an idea, a feel for it. If I tell you I have double thick cardboard, you can get an idea and a feel for how it's going to slice through. I'm just trying to put this in your hands somehow through the camera, and one of the best ways I can do that is show you by working against a really hard substance, which is wood. And wood should be a lot harder than most of the things you're cutting against, except for plastic, which we'll try some zip ties in a little bit. So far in bite, this slicer is impressive. I think this one's going to become my favorite between the two. I guess don't hold me to that in the future. We'll see how EDC tasks go, but I think I like this one better. I just really like that tip being in line with the center. I did a little bow drill with it earlier and found that it actually did a good job with that. The handle ergonomics are pretty comfortable to my hand. XL size gloves, and I can still get all 4 fingers on it, which is impressive. Places for my thumb, whether I'm holding it in some sort of hammer grip or not, just doesn't bother me. And that jimping is not so aggressive that it bites into my thumb. It just helps me sustain or hold my position, and I can do the functional things I would normally do with a folding knife, especially if I'm out and about and I don't have a fixed blade on me. Demko does have some fixed blades, but if I don't have a fixed blade, I can, wow, I actually cut through the whole thing. I can actually do just fine with something like this. Let's try the clip point, which is a hair thinner, a little thinner behind the edge perhaps. Let's take a look at the clip point and see how that does. I think from the factory, I think this one might have come just a touch sharper. But again, I said I think the other one is maybe my favorite, but maybe it's just thinner. It could just be that. Sometimes thinness is deceptive. You could think that something is sharper just because it's thinner. Yeah, it is sharper. or thinner. It's one of those. It's doing a lot of the same jobs and tasks with more ease, but I don't believe it's going to hold its edge quite as well, not because of the steel, just because it's probably a little bit thinner and I'm stressing that apex, that edge a little more. But the same handle, okay, same handle, same lock mechanism here, similar feel to the blade. The tip is close enough to center. It's just a little bit of a sweep there. Yeah, that one slices really good. I mean, clip points are great for outdoor blades. What I would really like to do with this, and maybe this is what I should probably do, I would like to shoot a squirrel or a rabbit with this as soon as Fur Bearers opens up here in a couple weeks in Minnesota. I would like to skin something with this. I think when it comes to skinning, which some people do actually use folding knives, don't think I'm nuts for saying that. When it comes to skinning, I think this would be superior to this. And I like the idea of this one. It's grivery, it's easy to wash out. The mechanisms are easy enough to get at and clean blood and guts out. And it's OS 10A, so I can sharpen this up on the spot in the field very quickly. Not that this would be any slouch, but when it comes to clip points, I just think they do better than a lot of other blades at getting into gut cavities and slicing. And it's such a small blade, and that's a compliment, it's a good thing. It's such a small blade that this precise tip would be very easy for me to, like surgery, insert into that gut cavity and kind of follow the line. If you've ever skun a rabbit, that's really what I should do with this. If you ever skun a rabbit and you tie up the legs, and then you get a stick and you put the stick between the legs and you wring the legs, you need a really, really sharp, thin profile blade typically to wring the legs but not cut through the tendons. It's just got to be a touch around. And then you kind of follow them down to the groin area, you make a loop, you cut out the back and you slide them down. And I feel like this blade profile is what I would prefer for that sort of thing. Either one of these, they're winners, guys. They're both winners. I already said that in my very first video, I think. I just don't know which one I like better. Let's keep using them. Zip ties are actually a really good, okay, next, zip ties. Zip ties, I actually think are a really good standard for performance because it is a thing that most people actually have to go cut. They're really hardened plastic. Like this is a tough plastic to cut with most things, and it'll tell you about edge durability as well. I have seen cheap steels completely roll just doing the cut test I'm doing right now. And so we'll find out what happens with this, if it's thick enough behind the shoulder or if it's too thin. I'm going to give them, I'll do 5 cuts as I go here and we'll see what happens. So just like I thought, this pops the zip ties pretty easily. Yeah, I think it's thick enough behind the shoulder that it does excel at just popping the piece apart. I don't think the edge is going to sustain much damage at all with something like this. Maybe if it was a much thicker zip tie, the industrial zip ties that are rated for, what is it, 80, 90 pounds, maybe those ones would have more difficulty, but this, it just pops them apart. And let's grab the other one now. This one is thinner, perhaps thinner behind the edge. Let's see what happens. Yeah, it pops them. I do feel like I'm putting a little more effort into it. Just one more time. That was already cut through. Okay. And that's the top of it. It's a little thicker. Let's try that. Maybe I might be putting just a tad bit more effort on this one. I'm going to go ahead and check the edge out. Oh man, it's still shaving sharp, I'm sure. That's very, very thin in a good way. This is what I want for an EDC blade. It's still shaving sharp, like actually shaving sharp. Right where I used it. Okay, and I've used this for a couple weeks by now. Maybe it's 3 weeks. I've used it for 3 weeks by now, only stropping it, hardly a touch here and there. This one, it's not going to feel quite as thin. Let's see if it's shaving sharp. Not quite. This one is not quite shaving sharp right now, but it's still very sharp. Let's see what happens if I strop it. Hang around for part 2, guys. I have more content coming. These are already good to go. I've given them the green light. I love them, but I want to strop them and just find out what other uses I can find that would maybe tell us something about these blades and which profile is going to be better for you. All right, so here's a hat from a company I used to work with for content, and they have different logos now, so this hat is way old. I'm just going to break down this hat a little bit and see if I can actually cut through the bill, which is pretty thick. I have to cut through the fabric. Yeah, you can do it. That was a particularly, well, that must be a plastic lined. It is. So that's a plastic lined inner on the bill, and it cut through that with pretty much ease, I would say. Let's try one more. Oh yeah, I did. I cut through into my table. Oops. I guess that's okay. I built the table. It's fine. Let's do another slice here. And now I can feel that this one slices through, you know, just a little better right off the bat. And I think when I was cutting zip ties with this, I actually think it was more difficult because it was thinner than the other one. The other one, if it's just a little thicker behind the edge, just a tad bit more shoulder, I think this pops zip ties a little better. And the clip point is still cutting, so I feel a little more resistance with it. And let me go ahead and slice through. Slicing, it does great. So this has a lot of slicing capability. I think push cuts are going to be superior with this one. It actually just felt a little better in hand doing push cuts with this one. This one, because it's thinner behind the edge, it excels a lot of other things. But maybe this is going to have some advantages over this in that application. But watch, this thing is, it's a scalpel. It's really sharp. And this isn't a slouch either. I just believe that, and that's a lot of plastic actually. I didn't realize that's a whole sheet. It's an entire sheet of plastic. That's why it was difficult to cut through. I just believe this can pop stuff a little better. So again, it's going back to an EDC task and the way that you use a knife. I'm sure you're not using it to cut up old hats, but this at least gives me some sort of feel for the capability of the blade, or the comfort of the blade at least. This thing is like a zipper. It's really sharp. Yeah, it's really hard for me to tell. Actually, guys, I think in part 2, I'll discuss more of the application with EDC and the way I think I would prefer to go if I could only get one. But at this point, I'm having a really hard time telling which one I would like more because they just excel at different things. And there are other blade designs that you can get, obviously, that are going to excel at other things. These are both winners. One more time, I'm already giving you the green light on these. They're good to go. Really appreciate them. The price point is appropriate. I think they're going to outperform a lot of blades out there. If you haven't tried the Shark Lock yet, this is my preferred go-to EDC style lock, as well as I'm starting to think hard use. I've used this one pretty hard in the last couple of weeks, and it's holding up with the territory of the Triad Lock right now, and I'm not getting rock lock in here. The Triad Lock has a lot of good things going for it. Obviously, Andrew Demko invented the Triad Lock, and I'm behind it. I like it. I own several Triad Locks. But when this comes out of my pocket, and I can hold onto it this way, and it's already open, and then I can also use it for those harder tasks where I need to bear down on this, and I don't feel like the lock is going to fail me. There's a lot going for it. So this might be the wave of the future. These are really, really good if you're looking for a budget option. I think these qualify, but if you want a little bit better for materials, remember, I already have some videos out about a 20CV version of this, which has the shark's foot, and that's another one that I think is very competitive with these themselves.